Heading into the 1960s, Jamaica's bipartisanship was fully established. The PNP and the JLP were the dominant political parties of the day, forming a noticeable divide between the people. On January 3, 1958, the West Indies Federation was established as an association to unite territories of the West Indies. This was supported by the British to facilitate the independence of the entire West Indies as a single territory. Jamaica, however, did not want to be a part of the group of nations, but rather wanted to stand on its own. So on September 19, 1961, a referendum was held in Jamaica, removing itself from the West Indies Federation with eyes set on becoming an independent state. So what exactly is a referendum? See, a referendum is a direct vote by the electorate on a proposal, law, or political issue, which can be initiated by the citizens or government of a nation. So if an unfavorable law or policy was implemented by the government, it can be voted on by the public and revoked. This is what leads to amendments in a constitution. A few months after the referendum, Jamaica established a Constitution Commission consisting of persons from the Senate and the House of Representatives. An 11-person committee was established to map the way forward for Jamaica. Soon after the establishment of the committee, they mapped out a plan for the Constitution and independence, which had to be sent to the Parliamentary Secretary in London, England for approval. The Commission agreed upon a constitutional democracy similar to what was present in England, but there was anecdotal evidence supporting Jamaica's exploration of a US-like constitution, but the idea was quickly dismissed. On February 1, 1962, the delegation responsible for planning the way forward for independence and the structure of the Constitution made their way to England for the approval from the British Legislative Council. But what exactly was in the Constitution? Some would argue that while the Constitution was written to protect the rights of the people, many other aspects were included to usurp powers indirectly to the Crown by way of the Governor General. But that is only the surface. One of the most detrimental aspects of the Constitution was the amount of power bestowed on the Prime Minister and to some extent, Leader of the Opposition. Let us explore. The Governor General is the one that appoints all the important offices of the government of Jamaica on the advice of the Prime Minister. Offices such as the government ministers, parliamentary secretaries, attorney general, senators, privy councillors, chief justice, president of the Court of Appeal, and director of public prosecution, among others, are all appointed by the Governor General on the advice of the Prime Minister, which is rarely challenged, if at all. The Governor General also determines the date of the general election and provides an assent to all parliamentary bills to make it law. I know. This isn't new information. Most Jamaicans know this is the case, as we are an annexed nation of Britain. But what most Jamaicans don't realize is the dangers associated with the Prime Minister having the authority to choose the most important offices in the nation. Human beings are inherently corruptible, especially those who are less economically well off. Because humans, in most cases, are looking out for their self-interests first. Therefore, knowing this primal instinct about ourselves, we can't leave the wealth and prosperity of a nation up to the integrity of an individual, which is exactly what was done. The Prime Minister nominates the most important offices of the nation without any dissent nor obstruction from anyone. This creates a situation where persons selected to serve the needs of the nation would instead serve the interests of the Prime Minister first. And this, by definition, is what corruption is. The judges who aspire to become Chief Justice will fall in line with the Prime Minister's demands. Similarly, for the MPs who aspire to become Cabinet Ministers and civil servants who aspire to become senators. Lawyers who aspire to become Director of Public Prosecution and superintendents who aspire to become the police commissioner. All these positions come with impressive salaries, and rallying back to the premise, humans put their self-interest first. So we can see how the current constitution sets up a machinery for corruption and nepotism. What the constitution should have in place is a system of governance where the major offices of the nation is voted on in Congress. One where a senator is voted for differently from an MP and differently from the Prime Minister or President. And a system where the major judges, police commissioners and cabinet ministers are voted for based on competencies, not based on who serves the interests of the Prime Minister best. What the Constitution should have in place is a separation of politicians from the government. Politicians should be focused on the legislation based on the needs of their constituents, while the government is run by field experts. But instead, what the Constitution entails is that a government minister can only be selected from members of Parliament of the winning party, who may not have the necessary skill sets to run the particular ministry. Politicians should be representatives of the people, nothing more, nothing less. One would be forgiven if they thought that the initial idea to have a constitution like the US was dismissed because there were never any true plans for Jamaica to prosper. One would also be forgiven if they thought that the founding fathers deliberately signed our prosperity away with the current constitution. One could even be forgiven if they thought it was all a farce to keep a colonial system in place decades after our so-called independence. But we'll explore further with